The first day at her new school had felt endless for Ava. The walls were bright, the voices loud, and every hallway seemed to echo with laughter that wasn't hers. She walked quietly, clutching her books close to her chest, her calm eyes taking in the sea of strangers around her. Most students barely noticed her as they hurried to their next class, but a few curious eyes followed her, studying her simple clothes, her soft-spoken manner, the way she carried herself with quiet dignity. By the end of the week, whispers began. They called her the quiet girl, the one who never spoke unless asked, the one who never seemed to react. During gym class that Friday, as the rest of the students gathered in groups, Ava stood at the edge of the court, waiting for instructions. She didn't realize that her silence had already drawn the wrong kind of attention. A group of students, the type who ruled the halls with their laughter and teasing, began to whisper among themselves, smirking as they looked her way. "Hey, new girl," one of them called out. "You gonna play? Or are you scared of breaking a nail?" A few others laughed, and Ava turned slightly, offering a small, polite smile before walking toward the basketball rack to grab a ball. Her calmness only fueled them more. Another voice shouted, "She's ignoring you, man," followed by more laughter that bounced off the walls. Ava didn't answer. She wasn't trying to prove anything to them. She was remembering her father's voice, calm and steady, from the countless evenings they had spent training together in their backyard. He had been a disciplined man, a martial arts instructor who believed that the body's greatest weapon was the mind. "Real strength never needs to shout," he would say, teaching her to stay grounded, to never let anger control her. Those words lived in her heart like a shield. The teasing didn't stop. One boy dribbled the basketball in her direction and let it roll to her feet. "Come on, show us what you've got," he said mockingly. Ava picked it up quietly and passed it back, her movements smooth and effortless. They laughed again, expecting her to fight back, to argue, to at least look angry, but she didn't. Instead, she joined the rest of the class and focused on the teacher's instructions, as if their words were just noise in the distance. Inside, though, she felt a familiar sting, not fear, but disappointment. She had moved to this school, hoping for a fresh start, a place where she could belong. Instead, she was standing in the middle of another crowd that mistook kindness for weakness. When the game started, she played with quiet focus. She didn't chase attention or try to impress anyone. Every movement was calm, every pass careful. A few students began to notice how quick her reflexes were, how effortlessly she dodged and passed the ball, but the bullies only sneered, too blind to see the strength behind her silence. When the final whistle blew, Ava gathered her things and walked out of the gym, her head held high. Behind her, the same voices whispered, "She's so weird. Doesn't she ever talk?" But for every cruel word that followed, her father's lesson echoed louder in her mind. He had told her that silence could be a kind of power, the kind that unsettles people who thrive on noise. And though she felt the ache of loneliness that day, she refused to let it change her. She walked through the crowded hallways with steady steps, her posture straight, her face calm. Somewhere deep inside, a small spark of strength burned, quiet, steady, waiting. Because Ava knew something those bullies didn't. Storms didn't always announce themselves with thunder. Sometimes, they began with silence, and one day soon, her silence would speak louder than all their laughter combined. The days that followed were harder for Ava. What started as teasing had turned into something crueler. The group of bullies, emboldened by her silence, decided to push further to see how much she could take before breaking. Every time she walked into class, someone whispered something under their breath. During lunch, a seat next to her would be filled with mocking laughter and sarcastic comments about her quiet nature. Ava never answered them. She ate slowly, calmly, refusing to give them the reaction they wanted. Her silence confused them, frustrated them even. They couldn't understand why their words didn't sting her the way they expected. But inside, Ava felt every insult. She just refused to let them see it. One afternoon, after basketball practice, when most of the students had already gone home, Ava stayed behind to gather her things. The locker room was quiet, except for the sound of her shoes against the floor. That's when she noticed the group 3 of the same kids who had teased her before, standing by the exit, smirking. "You think you're better than us because you don't talk?" One sneered. Another laughed, stepping closer. "Or maybe you're just scared." They surrounded her, blocking her way. Ava clutched her books tighter and took a step back, her heart racing but her expression steady. She didn't answer. "Say something," one of them said, shoving her shoulder lightly. "Come on, new girl. Where's your voice now?" The shove made her books fall to the floor, papers scattering everywhere. The sound echoed in the empty room. Ava knelt down slowly, gathering her papers one by one. The boys exchanged uncertain looks. They had expected her to cry or yell, not to calmly pick up her things as though they weren't even there. The leader of the group, frustrated, gave one more push. "What's wrong? Can't fight back?" he jeered. Ava's arm hit the metal locker behind her, the sharp edge leaving a small bruise. She winced slightly, but said nothing. Instead, she looked up at him with eyes that didn't show fear, just disappointment. That silent look made him step back, as if for the first time he realized she wasn't weak. She was choosing not to fight. Without a word, Ava stood, brushed off her clothes, picked up her books, and walked past them. They didn't stop her. For some reason, they couldn't. Something about the way she carried herself, calm, steady, unbroken, made their confidence crumble just a little. As the locker door swung shut behind her, the room felt colder, quieter, as if her silence had left a mark stronger than any punch could. That evening, when Ava got home, her father was in the backyard, practicing slow, precise martial arts movements, the same routine he had taught her since childhood. She tried to hide the faint bruise under her sleeve, but he noticed immediately. "Rough day?" he asked, his tone gentle but firm. She hesitated, then nodded. He didn't need to ask who had done it. Instead, he handed her a towel and motioned for her to sit beside him. "Did you fight back?" he asked. She shook her head quietly. He studied her for a moment, then gave a small, proud smile. "Good," he said. "Fighting isn't always about fists." Ava frowned slightly, unsure what he meant. "But what if they don't stop?" she asked softly. He paused, his eyes thoughtful. "Then," he said, "you'll know when it's time to stand, and how to do it with strength, not anger." That night, as Ava lay in bed, her father's words echoed in her mind. She traced the faint bruise on her arm but didn't feel fear anymore. Instead, she felt a quiet sense of power, like something inside her was waking up, not a desire to hurt anyone, but a new understanding of what strength really meant. The bullies thought silence was weakness. They didn't know that silence could also be discipline, the kind that holds back storms until the right moment. And deep down, Ava knew that one day soon, they were going to learn that lesson the hard way. The next day began like any other, but something about the air in the gym felt heavier. Ava walked in with her usual calm expression, holding her basketball close, determined to get through the day without trouble. She had already decided that no matter what the bullies said or did, she wouldn't let them see her break. The coach blew the whistle, and teams were chosen. As luck would have it, she ended up on the same team as the ones who had cornered her the day before. The moment the game began, they started their taunts again, low, cruel whispers meant only for her to hear. "Careful, new girl," one sneered as she ran past. "Don't trip over your own feet." Another laughed as he deliberately passed the ball too far, forcing her to chase it. Ava stayed focused, her face unreadable, her movements smooth, but she could feel their eyes on her, waiting for a reaction. Every time she refused to give one, they grew bolder. Halfway through the game, when she went for a rebound, one of them stuck out his foot. Ava's balance broke, and she hit the floor hard, her hand scraping against the polished wood. Laughter erupted instantly. The sound was cruel and sharp, bouncing off the gym walls like echoes of humiliation. The coach shouted something from across the court, but Ava didn't hear him. For a moment, she just stared at the floor, her palms stinging, her heart pounding in her chest. She could have stayed down. She could have walked out, but instead, she took a slow, steady breath and pushed herself up. The laughter faltered slightly as she stood tall, brushing the dust off her knees, and turned to look at them. Her eyes weren't filled with tears or anger, just calm defiance, the kind that made the bullies shift uneasily. For a moment, it was silent. But then one of them, desperate to save face, pushed her again, harder this time. Ava stumbled backward, hitting the ground once more, and this time the laughter came louder. But before anyone could move again, a sound cut through the noise, a door opening. The slam of it echoed like a thunderclap, and then came a voice, deep and steady, carrying across the entire gym. "That's enough." Every head turned toward the entrance. There stood a tall man in a dark jacket, his presence commanding without effort. Ava's father. He had come earlier than usual to pick her up, only to find his daughter on the floor surrounded by laughing students. The room froze. The bully's smiles vanished instantly. He didn't shout. He didn't rush forward or raise his fists. He simply walked across the gym floor, his boots clicking against the ground, each step heavier than the last. His eyes were calm, but there was something in them that made even the coach step aside. He stopped beside Ava, who was still sitting on the floor, too shocked to speak. Gently, he offered her his hand. She took it, and he helped her stand, his eyes never leaving the bullies. "Are you hurt?" he asked softly, his voice low but firm. Ava shook her head. "No, Dad." The bullies stood frozen, their confidence gone, their faces pale. Her father turned toward them finally, his tone calm, yet sharper than steel. "You must be very proud," he said evenly. "You needed all of you to knock down one person, my daughter." No one answered. The gym was silent, except for the distant echo of the basketball rolling away. "You see," he continued, his voice quiet but carrying through the air, "you think silence is weakness, but it takes more strength to stay calm than to lose control." The boys lowered their eyes, unable to meet his gaze. Without another word, he turned to Ava, resting a hand on her shoulder. "Let's go," he said gently. They walked out together, his presence alone leaving the entire gym in stunned silence. The laughter had died, replaced by a heavy guilt that no punishment could equal. For the first time, the bullies realized that real strength didn't need to roar. Sometimes, it just needed to walk into the room and look you in the eye. And for Ava, that day wasn't just the end of their cruelty, it was the moment she understood what her father had meant all along. Real power lives in calm, not chaos. A hush fell over the gym like a heavy blanket. The laughter from moments ago now replaced by stunned silence. Ava stood still, her eyes wide as her father slowly approached her. Every step he took echoed against the polished floor, calm yet powerful. He didn't raise his voice, didn't rush to anger. He simply reached down, his hand steady and sure, and helped his daughter to her feet. His presence filled the entire room, the kind of quiet authority that needed no words to command attention. Ava dusted herself off, embarrassed but comforted by the warmth of his hand on her shoulder. Her father turned to face the group of students who had bullied her, the same ones who just moments ago had been laughing so loudly. Now, none of them could meet his gaze. His expression wasn't full of rage like they expected. Instead, it was calm, measured, and strangely disappointed. He looked at them the way a teacher looks at children who should have known better. Then, in a steady, even voice that carried to every corner of the gym, he said, "You think she's weak because she doesn't fight back?" The words hung in the air like thunder before a storm. The bullies shifted uncomfortably, glancing at each other, unsure if they should respond. The gym teacher stood frozen by the door, unsure whether to intervene or simply stay silent. Ava's father continued, his tone calm but firm. "You see, I trained her not to waste her strength proving something to people who don't deserve it." There was no anger in his voice, just truth. The bully's smug confidence crumbled as his words sank in. His gaze swept over them one by one, not in judgment but in understanding, the kind that made people face their own reflection. "You believe strength is about shouting louder, pushing harder, or making someone else feel small," he went on, "but that's not strength. That's fear wearing a mask." Ava looked up at her father, her heart pounding. He wasn't defending her with fists or threats. He was doing something far more powerful. He was teaching. "Real strength," he said, his voice dropping lower, softer but sharper, "is knowing when to walk away. It's control. It's peace. It's restraint." The gym was so quiet that the sound of the wind outside could be heard. The bullies, who had always fed off attention and noise, suddenly found themselves powerless in the face of calm truth. They hadn't expected this. They'd expected yelling, maybe punishment, maybe even a fight. But this silence, this lesson wrapped in composure, was far heavier than any scolding could be. The gym teacher finally stepped forward, clearing his throat nervously. "Mr. Carter," he began. "Hi," but Ava's father lifted a hand gently, stopping him. "It's all right," he said simply. "Lesson's already been taught." Then he turned to Ava, his expression softening completely. He knelt slightly so that his eyes met hers, his voice lowering to something only she could hear. "You did well," he said quietly. "You stayed true to yourself. I'm proud of you." Ava blinked back tears, feeling the warmth of his approval wash over the bruises on her spirit. Then, standing tall again, he addressed the entire class one final time. "One day," he said, his voice echoing through the gym, "you'll understand that real power is in control, not in hurting others." No one dared move. Even the students who weren't part of the bullying stood still, staring in awe. The bullies' faces were pale, their arrogance replaced with something unfamiliar, guilt, as Ava's father placed a gentle hand on her shoulder and guided her toward the exit. The gym teacher instinctively stepped aside, almost as if bowing in respect. The doors closed behind them with a quiet click, leaving a silence that buzzed with emotion. For a long time, no one spoke. The coach finally blew his whistle softly, his voice uncertain. "All right, everyone dismissed," he muttered, but the students didn't rush out like they usually did. Instead, they left slowly, their thoughts heavy, by the end of that day. Word had spread through the entire school about what had happened in the gym, about the quiet father who had walked in and said a few calm words that hit harder than any punch. Some said he was intimidating. Others said he was inspiring. But everyone agreed on one thing. No one had ever seen such power in silence. And as for Ava, as she walked beside her father that afternoon, she realized that strength wasn't about standing above others. It was about standing steady within yourself, even when the world tries to shake you. The story of Ava and her father quickly spread through the halls like wildfire. Students whispered about what had happened in the gym, how a quiet man had walked in, spoken just a few calm words, and changed the tone of the entire school. No one could believe how powerful his presence had been, or how he had defended Ava without shouting or threats. Even teachers talked about it in the staff room, saying they had never seen such control, such dignity, from both father and daughter. Ava became the center of quiet admiration. People started to see her differently, not as the shy new girl, but as someone strong, in a way that didn't need to be loud. The same kids who once mocked her now looked away in guilt when she passed by. The bullies stopped bothering her completely, but it wasn't out of fear. It was out of something much deeper, respect. They had seen real strength up close, and it had left a mark they couldn't forget. Weeks went by, and the story became almost like a legend among the students. During lunch breaks, kids who had never spoken to Ava before now smiled at her, asked for help with schoolwork, or invited her to sit with them. She accepted their kindness with quiet grace, never showing pride or resentment. She didn't hold grudges, she simply moved forward. One afternoon, as she sat under a tree outside, reading, she heard hesitant footsteps behind her. When she turned, she saw one of the bullies, the same boy who had tripped her during basketball, standing there with his hands in his pockets, eyes on the ground. For a long moment, he didn't say anything. Finally, in a soft, uncertain voice, he said, "I'm sorry for everything." Ava studied him for a second, then closed her book and smiled gently. "My dad says forgiveness is strength too," she said. The boy nodded awkwardly, murmured a quiet thank you, and walked away, but the relief on his face was unmistakable. That small act of kindness spread faster than the story of the gym ever did. Soon, the atmosphere at school began to shift. People became more careful with their words, more thoughtful in their actions. Teachers noticed fewer fights, less gossip, and more cooperation. The principal, hearing about what had happened, decided to hold an assembly about respect and empathy. To everyone's surprise, she invited Ava to speak. Standing on stage in front of the entire school, Ava's voice trembled at first, but her father's words gave her courage. "My dad taught me that real strength isn't about how hard you can hit," she said softly. "It's about how much you can stay true to yourself, even when people try to pull you down." The room stayed silent, not out of boredom, but out of reflection. When she finished, she didn't expect applause, but it came anyway. Gentle at first, then louder, genuine. After that day, something beautiful happened. A few weeks later, the school launched a new program called Strength and Kindness, encouraging students to stand up for others and resolve conflicts with understanding instead of anger. Ava became its quiet symbol, not because she wanted fame, but because her story reminded everyone what dignity looked like. Even the bullies volunteered to help, perhaps trying to make up for what they had done, or maybe just because they had finally learned. The gym, once a place of humiliation, became a place of healing, where people practiced, not just sports, but respect. Every now and then, someone new would transfer to the school, and the story would be told again. "That's Ava," they'd whisper. "She's the one who taught this school what real strength means." But Ava never bragged or brought it up herself. She'd just smile and say, "It wasn't me. It was the lesson." And in a way, it was true, because what had started as a moment of cruelty had grown into something far greater, a quiet revolution of kindness. Her father's words lived on through her actions, echoing through every hallway, every heart that remembered. And as Ava walked through those halls, head held high, she knew she had finally found her place, not as the quiet girl who stayed silent, but as the one who changed everything without ever needing to raise her voice.